Yep, good. So why are we here? This panel will look at future work, and to me that says what do we have to do to be prepared to be in a growth environment from a workforce perspective in 15 years' time. And that is the purview of the CFE as well, not looking at 5 years to immediate effect, not looking at 30 years, much longer trends, but 15 years. Act now, and you will get what you plan for if you work hard at it. So but things are going to try and stop you doing that. So what are the challenges in the sense of future work? Obviously, demographics and a stable population, meaning no growth in the population at some point, is a big challenge for every economy. If they are in a position where that is the case, then one has to look at what advantages one can take from that. An economy that doesn't grow, but a population that doesn't grow but is aging. There are advantages potentially around that. If you have a population that has a fairly high immigration quotient, about 30%, then is it possible to use that as one of the engines for growth? And if you do not have population growth, then productivity is one of the only levers you have to have economic growth and prosperity and full employment. And that is definitely the target of Singapore. And how do you increase productivity? You do the stuff you do better, quicker, faster, lower cost, or you do other stuff. So there are two sort of levers here to look at, and the Committee for the Future Economy, certainly the one I'm on, is looking at the 15-year play, how to have full employment, how to protect against the wealth divide, how to ensure that those skills are relevant for the future in growth markets and growth sectors in a rapidly changing world. So technology is an advantage and a disadvantage depending how you see it. Social aspects such as the wealth divide. How do you incorporate small and medium enterprises, which make up the vast majority of Singapore employee base? And how do you ensure that people understand that adaptive skills over a career are going to be essential? Things are going to change more quickly, not less quickly. So your skills through your career will need to be adapted, and you need to learn through your whole career. And companies need to be set up to be able to provide that, and government as well. And the careers will be longer. So the Committee for the Future Economy number 2, which is chaired by Minister Iswaran, focused on growth markets and growth sectors and what we should do. And we've honed in on, so I'll come to why we're sitting here today to talk about this and what value that could bring to the committees and to the government to say, right, we've now got a much broader view about what we should be doing for in those 15 years. But our committee, looking at growth markets and growth sectors, is identified technology, so in the digital sense, so technology, the need for innovation and multi-skilled innovation, so not just the technological innovation, but markets, business model innovation, and region. Don't forget that we're in the highest growth region, which will still be the highest growth region then, and we have great advantages because we understand it. We have a great position in the region. So digitization, being able to innovate across the sphere of activity and look at the region and focus highly on the region, and build our skills. If you take that as a top line of a chart, then the bottom line might be, how do we build our skills in those areas and continue to build the skills? And if you squeeze those two together, it tells you what to do. And when you look at that in Singapore's context, certainly we're so well placed in so many areas. We must not forget that we are already well placed, and we must use that to our benefit and grow from there. So this conference, a dialogue, hopefully, Q&A, hopefully robust. But what we're really looking for is that healthy debate, maybe even a disrupting debate about questioning what people are saying on the panel, which I'll introduce in a minute, to stress test the way we're thinking on the Committee for the Future Economy as well. So IPS, with this forum, focusing on supporting but not always agreeing with necessarily the committee's thinking. And because of the room this is and the people in it, we have the opportunity to make those changes and to ensure that the outcomes are matched for the population, obviously, but also for business, because if it's not matched for business, it won't happen. What you'll hear today from the panel is issues around human capital, business performance and strategy, the academic and training aspects of this, the big trends, demographics and technology, looking at some scenarios, and those challenges that I mentioned earlier. A collaborative approach across SMEs is a novel idea that works in some places. That challenge of the wealth divide is also out there. In the Q&A sessions, as it comes up, please do, as you go through, look for things you've not heard before, perhaps. Look for things you want to challenge, and we'll have a good debate, and the panelists are certainly there to answer your questions. So, without further ado, I will introduce the panel, and we have 3 panelists across a broad spectrum of the subject of future work and people and the companies and the economy of a country. The first speaker will be Ms. Wong Su-Yen, and she's the Chief Executive Officer of the Human Capital Leadership Institute. I'm not sure how many of you have used that, but we certainly have in our company, and it's an institute that understands Asia and change and growth, I think, fundamentally, and we the guys that come out of that, I think one of my guys are in the room who's been on it, say that it's a world-class training institute. She's also the non-exec chairman of NERA Telecommunications, a global telecoms and IT provider, operates across the Middle East, Africa, Europe, and Asia, and is listed in Singapore. She's an independent director of Media Corp, and also for Yoma Strategic Holdings. So any Myanmar questions and activity and thinking in the broader scope of Asia, obviously she can answer all those questions. She brings 20 years of experience in business strategy, organizational transformation, human capital leadership and development. So we're very much looking forward to hearing from Su-Yen. The second speaker is Dr. Luuk van Breda, and he has 35 years of experience on complex projects in the fields of business management, project development, and implementation. He's worked on projects with the Asia Development Bank and the World Bank, and has been stationed in this region. I'm sure nearly all of us have, but some of us may be newer to the region, but he's lived in for years in Indonesia and the Philippines and Thailand and Singapore while working on projects in the Middle East, Africa, and South America. Through his 4 pillars methodology, Dr. Breda has spent the last 6 years creating and developing and delivering highly sophisticated training methodologies focused on negotiation and other themes, but also very much on business performance improvement and strategy development and implementation. He's highly experienced in running and delivering seminars on topics related to doing business and facing the challenges in a changing world, in a continuously changing world. And the third speaker is Professor Tan Eng Chye, Deputy President for Academic Affairs and Provost of NUS. He oversees the NUS's faculties, and schools by providing strategic direction and setting academic policies. His responsibilities include admission policies and processes, educational quality assurance, the budgets, the resources allocated to the faculties and the schools, and the development and the appointment of and promotion of tenure and tenure processes, as well as the reward and incentive schemes, so both an academic but also a running an institution experience. So we have human capital deep experience in the room, we have strategic, business, regional deep experience in the room, and we have academic and operational experience in that field also in the room. So I'm sure that we're going to have some interesting presentations and some lively debate afterwards, hopefully. I see I have 28 seconds left, so I have stuck to the time, guys. So they each have 15 minutes. After 30 minutes, a bell will ring. That will be 2 minutes left, 2 bells will ring, and I'm told I have to be fairly rigorous in the timing. So I will be, and I'll remain polite while being insistent. So for the first speaker, Ms. Wong Su-yen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In the next 15 minutes or so, I'd like to set the stage for our discussion about the future of work by sharing highlights of a piece of research that the Human Capital Leadership Institute, in partnership with CIPD, embarked on last year on the future of talent in Singapore 2030. Now that, of course, is coincidentally the same time frame that we're looking at, so it seemed appropriate to put that into today's context. Now, work and talent are, of course, inextricably linked, so I'll use that as a basis for setting up this session. Frame the context, I'll also be sharing about the implications for state, society, organizations, and individuals. During the World Economic Forum at Davos at the start of this year, there was a lot of discussion and debate around the fourth industrial revolution. It was said that developments such as artificial intelligence, robotics, nanotechnology, 3D printing, biotechnology, and so on are converging towards a new world. Concurrent to this technological revolution are a set of socio-economic, geopolitical, and demographic developments. There's a common statistic that's cited, which is that 7.1 million jobs, mainly office and administrative roles, will be lost between 2015 and 2020. 7.1 million jobs. At the same time, only 2 million jobs in computer, mathematical, and engineering, architectural related fields will be created in the same time period. So what happens to the remaining 5.1 million jobs that are lost? To stir thinking around one extreme, the WEF dialogue even included a panel with the discussion topic, "A World Without Work?" Now, such a future might be appealing to some of us, on the other hand, might be appalling to others. Closer to home, we are faced with another conundrum. In the next 5 years, we are going to see a drop in the growth of the local workforce. Whereas it has been growing at the rate of around 55,000 per year over the past 5 years, this is going to drop sharply to an average of 20,000 per year in the next 5. So clearly, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, we are faced with a shrinking workforce in the end. So clearly, Singapore's sustained success increasingly depends on how well all players, the state, organizations, and individuals themselves are able to grow the human capital engaged in value creation. For this piece of research, we used the Delphi technique to host an interactive discussion among our panel of Singaporean and Singapore-based experts to test, challenge, and ultimately distill what's understood as talent in Singapore. So the first question you have to unpeg is, well, how do you define talent? The next thing we then asked the experts were, what were the key drivers that they thought would shape the nature and understanding of talent in the period to 2030? I'll share the context of talent that the experts felt were significant. And I'll share 4 key areas. The first is around the influence of culture. Now, although there are differences, the experts generally agree that the cultural environment is a big influence on our understanding of talent. So according to the panel, the cultural status quo in Singapore is characterized, and again, these are obviously generalizations, by a lower threshold for risk-taking, high social cost of failure, keen focus on academic excellence, and the highly competitive drive in individuals. So clearly this has an impact on how we think about talent and the workforce. Second, labor market trends. The panelists highlighted several labor market trends as impacting homegrown talent. To varying degrees, panelists felt that a low unemployment rate of only 1.9% in 2015, labor skills shortages, and reduced inward migration would increase the sense of entitlement and complacency of citizens, negatively affecting talent quality in the long run. Third, many in the panel felt that complacency and a lower risk appetite in combination could mean that Singapore might not seize growth opportunities in service, manufacturing, research and development, art and culture sectors, and technology. Lastly, in terms of policy interventions, the experts generally acknowledge that the state interventions have been effective. Full employment, a highly educated workforce, an attractive destination for global talent, generally rising standards of living and security. Yet, it is argued by some of the experts that the downside is an over-reliance on the state to provide the solutions every time. So with that as the context of talent, we then used the drivers and trends to explore alternative futures. And we identified 4 scenarios. We ran a scenario building exercise with senior HR professionals in Singapore in December, and then we assembled the drivers and trends into 1 baseline and 3 distinct synthesized futures for Singapore. So I ask you to cast yourself 15 years out. Think about it in pretty tangible terms. So how old will you be? What will you be doing, right? So that way you can sort of frame your thinking around the year 2030. The first scenario is called Steady as She Goes. Now, in this scenario, we have created a baseline where 2030 basically is a recognizable projection of the present. In other words, there are no nasty surprises or assumptions. Current trends, meaning the focus on academic achievement, continues as that being a proxy for talent, full employment, reliance on foreign talent, and so on. These are all played out as per usual. Second, no one is an island. In this scenario, we explore a future where technology has removed the middle person in many relationships. So now this starts to look very different. For example, lenders and borrowers don't need the bank as an intermediary when they use peer-to-peer or crowdsourcing platforms. And individuals and groups start to disintermediate traditional broadcasters by creating their own content and selectively sharing updates in the networks. So you see new business models using new technologies to disintermediate them. The third scenario, Fortress Singapore. This is an interesting one. It's driven by threats to security. It explores what it means for Singapore to conscientiously strengthen its defensive capabilities to protect itself against physical, cyber, civil, political, economic, and psychological attacks. And in the last scenario, Bless Thy Neighbor, Singapore has a vision of a stable, prosperous region and draws on the financial and human capital to lead the transformation of the region. Certainly appropriate given what Jonathan mentioned earlier as well. Singapore recognizes that it is ultimately beneficial for it to build the capability of ASEAN to deliver better lives to the millions. Now, given the theme of this conference, I thought I'd delve a little bit more into the second scenario, No One is an Island. This scenario really examines how technology, politics, and social shifts contribute to a citizenry that takes personal ownership of their lives and their life choices in 2030. By extension, this scenario paints a picture of how talent and work could evolve in the next 15 years. So let me first start about talking about political drivers and trends. So if you imagine the year 2030, Singapore now has a growing entrepreneur class. These new businesses are thriving, encouraged by a more experimental policy environment, and working with these entrepreneurs to create and adjust policies, or simply accepting that these organizations should be given the space to try new things without policy guidance. And some of the speakers yesterday that speak about this as well. The crowdsourcing policy approach works so well that this has now been applied to other areas, for example, adult care and social services. With an aging population, small families, policy experimenting has resulted in a number of non-profit initiatives led and delivered by the community. Now, the government in this scenario recognizes that the social compact is shifting. The price for innovation is a much more diverse professional class, and greater community ownership of social issues is a call for more transparent, co-created policy. The benefits of a more mature relationship, however, are clear. A more trusting relationship between citizens and state, high awareness and ownership of the issues, and the injection of new thinking and solutions. What about social drivers and trends? Now, seeing the success of entrepreneurs in emerging sectors has brought about new business models and ways of working. This contrasts sharply with the current conventional preference for a secure, lower-risk professional career. These sectors are looking for skilled, highly motivated employees who may not have gone to the best universities. These new businesses, while not secure, offer an exciting alternative to those looking for developmental opportunities where the ideas and energies can be channeled to the creation of something new and novel. Singapore now, in 2030, has thriving startups, mainly in technology, and numerous grassroots organizations focused on providing solutions to social issues. And the sharing economy is beginning to emerge. Car ownership, for example, long seen as an essential sign of success, is now seen as unsustainable and has been largely replaced by car-sharing alternatives. And we certainly saw a lot of discussion about this yesterday as well. Even established institutions, such as universities, are responding to the shift to crowdsourced and co-created solutions. Again, I reference back to one of the speakers yesterday who talked about how education as a service could emerge. Third, technology drivers and trends. Now, in the year 2030, Singapore has been very keen to adopt new technologies and, for example, has implemented successfully driverless vehicles. Not just the technology, however, but more importantly, the legal framework and the procedures and infrastructure to enable driverless vehicles. On the whole, as citizens, we seem to be pleased with this innovation 15 years out. We're able to pick up vehicles on average 10 minutes before we need transportation. More importantly, the system has revolutionized the way we think about logistics. When coupled with a road pricing system, as we have here, has enabled us to optimally use the road infrastructure that we have. In the financial sector, new innovations are likewise impacting business. Peer-to-peer lending, for example, transactions now amount to $15 million and are growing as trust grows. The big draw is that the return is actually higher than that offered by the best fixed deposit option. So think about that potential scenario. And obviously, there is a lot of convenience around payment through mobile ICT devices. Now, beyond the descriptions of the scenarios, what's perhaps of greater interest are the implications of this scenario on state, society, and organizations and individuals. From a state perspective, what does this mean for talent? It means that jobs will be lost in traditional sectors, and as we transition to new sectors and new technologies, there will need to be more social safety nets and protections for people as they transition from being in work to going through work transitions. Now, there will be a drive to encourage higher engagement of the citizenry in policy co-creation that requires different skills in the civil service. And I reference back to one of the sessions yesterday who also talked about the evolution of the public service. In terms of society, 15 years out, if you buy the particular scenario that actually unfolds, what it requires is changing attitudes to what constitutes success. So it is more acceptable in this situation to not focus on academic excellence per se, but to try other approaches, for example, being an inventor or an investor setting up a business. The sharing economy also emerges, and car ownership, for example, as I mentioned, is no longer seen as cool. Instead, there are car sharing alternatives. There's a higher risk threshold, and there's a shift away from dependency on the state to provide all the solutions and to also take the blame when things don't go well. It is a maturing social contract. Third, on organizations. New business models and technologies will certainly cannibalize traditional sectors. The workforce's higher expectations of their employment manifest itself with demands in a greater say in job design, workplace flexibility, and so on. This will require a change in management skills and leadership approaches. Looking at how you build trust into the employment relationship will be important. And those who do not want to seek traditional career ideals will pose a challenge to some organizations as they grapple with attraction and retention of talent. What do you do when talent is no longer a fixed employee, but a member of the free agent nation? Lastly, in terms of the impact on individuals, greater uncertainty is clear. Given the technology transformation, creative destruction, there'll be a question of how to maintain employability, acquiring new skills, and go into another sector. Employees in general will need to feel more comfortable taking charge of their work, and more importantly, to bear personal responsibility for their actions. This is a fair expectation of employers, and I think the common thread here is one of taking ownership and having a constructive voice and being accountable for crafting one's career over one's lifetime. More individuals will also see a higher appetite for risk and try and explore new pathways for success. It looks very different than today. So, in many respects, we are already seeing glimpses of this scenario, though it could also be argued that elements of Fortress Singapore and Bless Thy Neighbor are also in play. Gazing out into the future inevitably and necessarily raises more questions than answers. So as we close, allow me to pose a few questions which also nicely tee up our next two discussions. First, in addition to the technical capabilities required of talent for the economy, what are contributions or qualities of talent do we desire? We talk a lot about STEM, but again, a reference back to one of the panelists yesterday who talked about the need for humanities and how you actually think about that holistically to craft the kinds of innovative, interrelated solutions that we need for the future. Second, how do we go about treating talent not just as an input factor, but as human capital? What do we lose as a society if we downplay humanity and focus only on what talent can deliver in the short term? Where do we place needs, aspirations, and personal mastery? Lastly, in a more complex world, is our present understanding of talent adequate? What are the consequences of admitting more diverse categories of talent? What is the price of excluding talent because they don't fit in with the current norms? Personally, what stands out for me across the 4 scenarios is we need to constantly cultivate our learning agility, adaptability, and resilience. Such traits will stand us in good stead even as jobs will continue to be made obsolete. And we must continue to be open, inclusive, and pragmatic. In a worst-case scenario, Fortress Singapore, we may be gripped by fear and become more tribal, putting up walls or fortresses. And what we have to recognize is that this will only stifle our ability to innovate and ultimately detract from our ability to thrive in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to come here with outcomes, recommendations or solutions. What I'm going to do this morning is giving you a view of what I have engaged in my travels all over Asia and the trend for the future, but also the expectations of people, what really is happening. And that is not only about corporates, SMEs, but it is about the people, because they make the future, also in Singapore. Of course, you all know here that it is Singapore. I'm not going on over all the slides, but I will give you an overview. Developing core skills. As you see, there are many and many. But here is the point. Can one person have all those skills on his own? No. Those skills are us together, because that are core skills where skills are about. Some is very good in the technical side, some is good in selling, some is good in marketing, some can be the director, and I come back to that also in a minute. But you have to have all those skills and the potential, especially in Singapore. And I've spoken to thousands of people in this country. I came here the first time in 1969 in a different Singapore. I lived here for another 10 years in the 70s and the 80s. And we liked it so much, my wife and I, we came back 3 years ago. And we still like to stay. What the future of economy of Singapore needs is a learning is done with collaboration, what we're trying to do here. We collaborate to come to a discussion about the future of Singapore. Critical thinking. And yesterday, that was really the point. Everybody was thinking about how the technology would bring Singapore forward. Communication, a big issue of mine, and I will come a little bit later back to that. And creativity. There is enough creativity, from the bottom to the top. I spoke to people who are 10 years old here in Singapore. They come up with ideas you would not believe. Yes? So don't extend the creativity only to people in this room. Creativity starts from the bottom up. Okay, the impact of technology. How much has technology changed the way organizations are run? Do we really know? Do we really know how organizations are run? Yes? Maybe the board knows. Do they? How many board members are visiting the bottom end of their organizations? And I'll give you an example in a moment. Yes, we partially know, but do we really change? As an example, and I'm not used to staying behind a lecture desk, I normally run around on the stage when I do a presentation. However, I'll give you an example of what we did in a telecom company in Malaysia. I knew the chairman very well, and I'm old enough to tell him what I think. So what happens was that they wanted to bring a new product on the market. However, that product was only being discussed between the marketing department and the sales department. And I told him, we're doing something wrong here. And he said, what do you mean, Luuk? I said you work in a pyramid organization. What means that the top makes the decision. And this is very clear in Asia specifically, also in other countries, but over the years, the pyramid decision is made on the top. And everybody has to do what comes from the top. And I said, why don't we turn the pyramid? And he said, what do you mean? I said, why don't we turn the pyramid so that the employees make the decisions? He said, okay. He said, could we have a discussion about it? 2 weeks later, I brought 40 board members to Genting Island. And what we did, and what I do in the programs we run for many organizations, we tell them that we don't allow them any technology within the discussions. So they couldn't use their phones, they couldn't take a laptop, they only could have discussions. Now I can tell you that normally, of course, this happens when young people have a problem with their phones, they can't get it out of their hands, they bump into everybody. But the guy who had the problem was 61 years old. He went all white. We thought he got a heart attack. And what happens was that I said to him, you are as old as, oh, I'm a little bit older than that, but I said, you are about as old as me. I said, when you went to school, did you have any technology? Or did you have to communicate with people? And he said, oh. I tell you, out of that meeting and discussion of 4 days, came 400 new ideas and concepts from 40 people. But the decision was made that we would try to turn the pyramid around. So I was asked to go into the company and run the 4 pillars methodology. When you ever later on want to ask me about it, I will go in a discussion with you or talk. But what happened was that we went through the whole company of 3,600 people, and what happens was, who you think had the best idea? Anybody have any idea? What department, what are the managers, the people? Nobody has an idea. The cleaning lady. She had the best idea of the whole organization, and she saved the company $1.7 million that year. The reason? Because she was one of the person with the guy who brought the post around, went in every department. And she made a change. We have done many of those organizations. We found out that people on the bottom, yes, we can talk about academics, and have a master in mathematics, but the people on the bottom have as much ideas as we have, and maybe more. But we don't give them all the chance to get those ideas out, because we are too structured on the top. Impact of the technology. What will the impact be on the relation between the company and the employees? I've just gave you an example, but there are many of those. From small companies to big companies, to anything we do, yes, it comes down that without employees, we don't have an organization. And I think organizations should think about it, when tomorrow all your employees walk out, there is no organization anymore. The discussion of all parties should really be the 5 W's and the how. How are we going to come to discussions in the whole organization? Do you want your people, your employees, to walk in and only come there to have their monthly salary and walk in with their bag, oh yeah, another morning? Or do you like them to come in whistling every morning? Because when you get them whistling any morning coming into your organization, they will be more productive also. And they will go outside after 5 o'clock or any time they go home, they will still think about the organization. Technology, ideas and concepts change over time. However, we should think before we change or communicate our attention to the marketplace. When we agree, we can look forward to the future. We should think, when we have an idea, think how we can bring that in the market. How can we communicate that to another person? How can we have an intention and the tension and the change and everything about it? welcome to the future. I will not go completely through this one. There are too many things, but like Ms. Wong said, leadership is a very important thing, decision making, the processes, and to ensure the right people are on the right place. Let me go a little bit into the SME situation. We talk a lot about that Singapore has to increase the SME part from about 800 to 1,500 more SMEs. I know people outside this room, young people, yes, and Singapore can probably create 2,000, 3,000 SMEs. But they need backup. And not only backup in the product they try to develop, the concept they try to develop, they need access to marketing, sales, they need finance. They're all available, but we talk only about the negative impact sometimes. Singapore should be a very positive society. Yes? Think about yourself. When you are positive, you succeed. When you're negative, yes, you're dead tomorrow. So, to align SMEs with corporate is happening a lot of times. I have done this many times, talk with, but the SME still stays an independent organization. That's what it should be. But they can align, especially when they want to market abroad or market within the organization for a product. Yes, I'm not talking about subcontracting. I'm talking real relationship between the SME and the corporate. They exist, but we will have to talk much more about it in the sense that corporates have also to think about those issues. Aligning SMEs with other SMEs. Now, years ago, I was asked, and maybe probably everybody knows now from my accent, but I'm originally from the Netherlands. I was asked by the government if we could develop a program for SMEs to make it easier for them to do business, especially in Asia, South America, further away from Europe. So we developed a program, I did that with one of my colleagues, where we did put SMEs together, what already been in the paper here or so about collaboration, how we could develop something where, and we call it here pods, yes, to make a company bigger for export. I've been a long time in the marketplace, and I've always found out when you go abroad, it takes about 15, 18 months before you really do a business. Yes, because people first want to hold your hand, they want to ask, are you married, how many children, are you well, have you healthy, and all those kinds of, have you played sport, do you do this, yes, before they even talk about the business. So what is important for Singapore to look at all the SMEs in the marketplace, new, old, everything, how they can develop into a situation where they are working together to make business abroad, because Singapore has to increase their business abroad by about 75%. I'll go a little bit quicker. Changing the SME the way to do business, I've just explained this to you. Join the discussion, decision making, invest in opportunity, integration, yes, use existing knowledge to make sense of new information. Now the other thing is we talk a lot about PMEs in the moment. I've spoken to a company here in Singapore, quite a big one, who are looking for somebody to place in Vietnam. And they interviewed 40 young people. None wanted to go. You should not say that to a Dutch person because we travel all over the world. The reason? They didn't like the safety. They didn't like to go because it was too dangerous and they were safe in Singapore. That's the way everybody has grown up. Even my wife wants to live here because she thinks Singapore is the safest place in the world to live. Yes? So I can imagine what they think, but on the other hand, companies have to exist by placing people abroad. Why we don't put PMAs and young people together? One has the knowledge from a country, one has the technical knowledge, and then we can place them in the place where they have to be. I have to be quick. We have to overcome the poor habits associated with misuse of personal technology. We talked about it yesterday, that's correct. Work on issues of of the workforce and resolving high attrition which exists at the moment. Singapore has quite a high attrition. And the reason for this is that young people want to become managers when they come out of university, want to earn 150,000 Singapore dollars, and when they don't get it, they look for something else. I've spoken to many of them. I speak to students and graduates every day. Yes, skills needed. I'll leave you with that. Bridging culture, negotiate to win-win. Yes, present your thing and listen. These are my ears on this thing because they're big, so they could just go on. Your questions, your answer. What I say is there are no wrong questions, so there can be no wrong answer. Your desire to change must be greater than your desire to stay the same. We know that Singapore has to change because without it, we can't go look in the future. Thank you. I have one more slide. Oh, where is my last slide gone? Somebody has disturbed my slide. Anyway, I will show you the slide a little bit later on because this is part of the presentation. Some gentleman did put it in and it is now disappeared. Anyway, thank you very much, and when you want any discussion or talk about it, let me know.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, much has been said about the fourth industrial revolution, so I'll not dwell on this, but fair to say that I think we are seeing a confluence of biological, physical, and the digital all coming together at the same time. And also, quite a number of speakers has talked about the jobs being lost, but I think it's useful to say that there are a lot of opportunities too. So from the perspective of an educator, what does all these drivers have on education? These are some of the things or features that we can glean. That for our graduates, it would mean multiple jobs and careers across one working life, and the opportunities in the industry can come and go extremely quickly. So the adaptability is of critical importance. More jobs are susceptible to automation and technology disruption. So for instance, Foxconn had recently replaced 60,000 jobs with robots in China. And continuing education, and this is part of Skills Future, would become a fact of life because some knowledge can become obsolete very quickly, and all of us would have to continue to upgrade and seek knowledge and competencies as we move along. So if you look at from the context of, say, a university like NUS, we take in 7,000 students every year, right? I have an undergraduate population of 28,000. It's a big university, and in order to ensure that all our graduates are of a certain level of competency, and you need to do your scaling extremely carefully. Now, in terms of what are some of the key attributes that we would expect our graduates, and in the context of what Suyin has said, talents for Singapore, these are some of them. One, very rigorous foundation in disciplinary knowledge, and certainly that would give you the access to advanced knowledge. And in this particular area, I would want to say that STEM is of critical importance. Recently, we took a survey. I wanted to test NUS students on their quantitative reasoning ability or competency. And I gave the survey participants 5 questions. The average score was 2.2. All right. And this is across the entire universities. Even engineering and science do not score more than 2.2. All right, they are around there. All right, and that actually worries me quite a bit. Right, and this is one reason why I have now collapsed a lot of the quantitative reasoning module, and I have actually set up a team, all right, to offer quantitative reasoning for the whole university. Now, aligning disciplinary education with industry needs. This is of more importance now. And 2 years ago, we have decided, for instance, to make internships compulsory for engineering and computing. And one important thing that we have to make sure is that the internship has to be carefully and meaningfully integrated into the curriculum. Now, the solid foundation of basic literacy, literary and quantitative skills, I think that's a given. And on top of that, there are a broad base of 21st century skills, which Dr. Luuk has actually mentioned. And broadly, you need that global outlook, you need communicative skills, you need creative and enterprising spirit, and one thing which we think is quite important, the life and soft skills that are often not sort of consciously taught in the university. So here are some examples of soft skills and life skills, which we have sort of incorporated in some of our programs. I don't have time to go through every one of them, but I'll just give you 2 instances. One is the entrepreneurship, right? Back as early as 2001, right? We were trying to imbue a spirit of entrepreneurship amongst our students. And we set up our first NUS Overseas College in Silicon Valley. At that time, Singapore does not quite have the startup environment or ecosystem. So in order to allow our students to have a taste of that, we outsource. So we send our students to Silicon Valley. Right now, we have 8 NUS Overseas Colleges. 1 is in Silicon Valley, 1 is in New York City, 1 in Stockholm, in Sweden, 2 in China, 1 is in Beijing, 1 in Shanghai, and 1 in Israel, in Tel Aviv. All right, we have 2 new additions, 1 in Switzerland and 1 in Germany. Now, what do our students do in these overseas colleges? They are not brick and mortar universities or colleges, but what we have done is that to attach our students to startup companies, right, in all these places. And they actually do an internship of 1 full year. That's what they do in the day. In the evenings, they take courses. And these are primarily entrepreneurship courses at our partner universities. So in Silicon Valley, our partner is Stanford University. In New York City, it's with NYU. In China, in Shanghai, it's with Fudan University. In Beijing, it's with Tsinghua as well as Breda. And in Israel, it's with Tel Aviv University and the Technion Institute of Technology. So it's quite interesting. The students do a full year of internship. When they return to NUS in their 4th year, we put them together in what we call the enterprise house. It's basically a dormitory, but we put them together because we want them to continue to mix and continue to sort of engage one another so that they can think about entrepreneurship while they are completing their 4th year of studies. So now, 15 years after we have started NOC, we have quite a nice ecosystem within NUS. So much so that we have to extend beyond NUS. We have rented a block that was to be vacated by JTC just across the highway, across the University Hospital. And now this is popularly known as Block 71. All right. In the last 3 years, right, many of our students' companies have been sold. Right. So in 2001, when we were trying to set up this, there were a lot of naysayers who said that you cannot teach students entrepreneurship. All right, no way, it's innate. You either have it or not. But like I said, in the last 3 years, 12 companies were sold. Zopin, one of the company sold recently was sold to Zendesk for $30 million US. All right, and interesting also, you look at the graduates who started these companies, you would imagine that whether they are all STEM graduates. The answer is no. All right, one of the 5 entrepreneurs that started Zopin was a graduate from FASS, Arts and Social Sciences. All right, so naturally, the students will know how to team up, all right, to make sure that, they have complementary strengths, all right, be it in humanities all the way to STEM, right? So this is one example. Another example which we have recently introduced is the Roots and Wings program in NUS. What does Roots and Wings refer to? Roots will refer to the intra-personal skill sets or the life skills, right? It would refer to things like perseverance, mindfulness, confidence. So these are very intra, right? It's about the person. It's about the personal mastery that I'm talking about earlier on. Wings refer to interpersonal skill sets. These are how you engage with your superiors, with your peers, with your subordinates. This also involves your communication skills and your ability to engage with one another. We know that we can't teach this sort of things to our students, but what we try to do is really to sensitize our students to the importance of such skill sets. Right? So I can give you examples of what we do, but what we have done is that all our students, if they are not interested in doing this, they would have to opt out. So it is an opt-out system. So you are in unless you really come to us and say that, yes, I'm not interested in this program, I don't want to do it. Right? Interesting, when we started this, we only focused on certain faculties like science, arts and social sciences, and engineering. Then very soon, medicine, dentistry, law school came to our program and they said that, yes, they want it for their students too. So from this year onwards, it's going to be given to all NUS students, regardless of which faculty you're in. Now, just recently, we set up our School of Continuing and Lifelong Education. And again, this is part of the Skills Future initiative, and this is in complete alignment. Now, what is going to be different for this School of Continuing and Lifelong Education? I'll just cite some of the important features. One, it is for adult learners, but we are going to be fully leveraged on technology. All classes are going to be blended, which means that a lot of the materials will be given online. And when you come to class, there will be face-to-face lessons, but the face-to-face lessons would actually create more opportunities for the professors to build deeper critical thinking skills amongst the student learners. All right, so that's one. So we are going to use a gamification platform. All right, so we know that people play games. Online games are very popular. We have actually created a platform for NUS undergraduates to study, but all right, in a sense, in a gaming environment. This has actually shown, tested to be quite effective for undergraduate students. But we are quite unsure whether this will work as well for adult learners. But nonetheless, I think we are trying. We will be tweaking. And we also would have platforms to encourage team-based learning. Right? So these are a lot of this NUS platform leveraging on technology that we are going to use. The second feature that is useful for scale is we are going to do a lot of things in bite-sized quantities. So we know that, well, a lot of us target degrees, all right, as the ultimate. But it can be quite formidable for a working adult if you tell him or her that you may have to spend 5 to 6 years or 7 years doing a degree part-time, right? But instead, we start with certificates, all right? And these certificates can slowly be stacked up towards the degree. So you can perhaps take 5 or 6 certificates, all right, over a period of 5 to 6 years, and then they can be stacked up towards the degree. And each of these certificates basically would imbue the graduates or the participants with a certain set of skill sets or competencies, right? And I think these are the 2 important key features of a skill. There are actually more features, but I think this is one of our attempt to make sure that lifelong learning is really imbued in the minds of our students and of everyone in Singapore. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Tan. Thank you very much to all the speakers. If I just review what I heard there and bring out a couple of points that I think might be of particular interest. Suyen discussed the fact that technology is a challenge, and there are a few golden threads through these conversations, and also through the future work thinking, which I'll come to at the end. But you know, will technology really destroy jobs? We are seeing examples, Foxconn and so on. We're seeing examples of how that's moving, but there are many technologies that have been in place over many years, disrupting train, the invention of rail, etc., invention of telephone communication, and people seem to have adapted, but the new world is unknown, and that's the challenge, right? And will that destruction of jobs lead to more protectionism, perhaps? And maybe I'll kick off a question in a minute along those lines. And will markets, for example, be harder to access? Therefore, policy intervention, is Singapore world class at that, actually, from a foreign MNC point of view, coming into Singapore, working with inside the economy here and employing people in Singapore. We certainly think that Singapore, of many countries, does seem to focus well on policy around what can support the reality of the economy, the reality of the world in the long term. She talked about scenarios. 4 scenarios, that's quite a lot, because in scenario planning you have to be able to flip between them at any point. So you have to be prepared for all of them and choose one and then flip to the others. So there's challenges there in looking at the Singapore scenarios. And she brought out the social aspects. And again, that to me is a golden thread. It's all very well the economy, but if people aren't, I'm going to say happy, then it's much harder. It's much harder to plan an economy, and it's much harder to be successful. Dr. Van Breda talked about core skills, talked about the collaborative requirement for collaboration across skills. Not everybody can do everything, and I think high-performing companies, high-performance culture companies know this. And you look at the core skills of individuals and you say, this is a real team. And we must not think as a leader we need to do it all. In fact, if you do think you can do it all, you will fail. Critical thinking, communications, he emphasized the positives of Singapore around creativity. I think there's sort of an underlying thought that Singapore entrepreneurism, creativity, actually more compliance, more driving to result. But I agree with Dr. Van Breda, there's huge positives in Singapore. If Singapore isn't creative, how the dickens do we have what we have? Technology was another golden thread, which I'll come back to. Leadership. Does the leadership really understand technology? I think there's one company in the world on their board that has a CTO that is under 30 years old. And this sort of was breaking news headlines. Most of the people who lead companies are those, maybe not the 61-year-old in your group that couldn't deal without it, but many of us sort of look at it slightly quizzically. And should that change, driving organizations on their head and taking really the grassroots ideas, people who see everything, why not ask them? Can technology stop communication? Those who question lead was another theme, and aligning culture to strategy. I think that is absolutely vital. And the culture, the benefits of the culture of Singapore, and things change over time, but the benefits of the culture of Singapore to the drive to the economy needs to be something that's considered as Singapore plans. SMEs, again, is a theme. A vast majority of employees in Singapore work for SMEs, special challenges, and it is a must for Singapore to get that right. And Prof. Tan talked about the impact of education. Of course, not one career. In the golden thread of change, people have to change, and people are changing. Is in fact not having one career, are we seeing aspects that maybe it's a Darwinian thing, where the young kids don't want one career? That's lucky, because we're going to have a world that has businesses that want people to have more than one career. Are the two things actually linked? Technology, again, a golden thread, continuous education, but don't forget the foundations. I think that's very, very critical, Prof. Tan. Foundations, standards. Once you have that, then you can, if I think in terms of business models and computational models, the horizontals, foundation of and high standards in education that then can become relevant more deeply in the vertical. But those foundations are still very, very relevant. Industrial alignment with education, hugely important, and I don't know anywhere else in the world that does it as effectively as Singapore, in the sense of the communication and the conversation that the education institutions have and the research institutes have with industry. And what do you need? What is it? Come and craft with us together. Communications, the right brain came through again quite strongly. I think I've got that right. Right brain is the painter, is that right? And if you want to really become entrepreneurial or really skilled in any field, go and live with those guys. And the Silicon Valley example is one of those. And the scale approach, again, this recognition of the reality of the world. So I just close on the summary by saying, to me, there's golden thread of technology. For future work, 15 years, technology. It is continuous flow. There's no real step changes. Moore's law, there's a discussion, will it continue or not? But anyway, in 15 years, I'm pretty sure that we'll get more of that, more efficiency in technology. How do we adapt to that? Things will change. Things have always changed, but the speed of change, and especially for an economy that is so focused in a few areas. Singapore can't and shouldn't do everything. So how should it focus on when you take the theme change? Changing economies, changing markets, changing politics, changing people. And therefore the requirements of the workforce change all the time. And the importance of soft skills and the ability to communicate. So I think that was a very broad and I'm sure in the questioning, hopefully more detailed analysis of the challenges and the opportunities around what does Singapore do, what do we do to ensure we can sit here in 15 years and have a conversation about the next 15 in the same way. So given that, I will open the floor up to questions. Maybe I will start with one question myself and then open the floor up. As I said, if you've heard something you've not heard before, that's something good to question, right? Or something you may not think or want more information about to say, is that really the case? My question would be to Suyen, and it is about the fact that does technology really destroy jobs? So there's the computer and IT was invented, I don't know, frankly, I don't know when, but it certainly came into use much more in the 90s. And the difference in the 90s and the 60s is huge, but is unemployment higher? So there's been some step changes, and now it looks like exponential change. But if it does destroy jobs, what impact do you think that might have on Singapore? I mean, I'm talking not in Singapore, but globally in the markets.
So absolutely, technology does destroy certain jobs, but it does also create other forms of jobs. So, and it happens on two levels. One is obviously new forms of jobs that enable the technology. But beyond that, there's another element, which is, for example, if you look at some of the platforms that have arisen, they've actually allowed people to become mini entrepreneurs unto themselves. Even if you look at something like a carousel, at one level, rebonds, different levels, people have actually been able to earn, maybe it's not a job in the conventional sense of the word, but derive different income streams. And I think that's something that technology absolutely does enable. I think the challenge that we have, however, is one of synchronization and alignment, because these are all interconnected issues when you think about work. So technology is racing ahead. The question is, are policies and regulation keeping pace? And then beyond that, are societal attitudes, also aligning? And then are organizations still stuck in a 1980s framework, or have they adapted to be able to deal with the technological change that is wrought, that's changing the way work is done? And then are individuals similarly also adapting in line? So what you see is technology is out here, regulations a little bit behind, organization structures are further behind, and then finally individual mindsets may be a little bit further behind. So it's how do we bring all that together?
Thank you very much. So we'll take questions from the floor. Please state your name and your organisation, and if it's specific to a person, if you mention that as well. So we'll take questions.
Good morning, I'm John. I'm just a busybody from Norway. I'm glad to hear Prof talk about the new way of collecting credits to build upon to get to a degree, right? It's about time, I think, our IHL does that. I'm very comfortable to hear that you're doing that. Now, there's one thing I think NUS may need to take a step further, right? You still talk about STEM. Yo-Yo put an article 2 years ago, January 2014, saying we should move from STEM to STEAM. The A is from the art side. I'm familiar with that because I'm an architect. And in our training, we don't talk about the left side or the right side of the brain, which is artificially created, right? It's the whole brain working in conjunction and in harmony. And we float from one side to the other side, and sometimes both sides are fighting at the same time. So the nature is a lot more complex than the artificial definition by disciplines. Now, and the second thing is about scenario planning. There are 4 proposed this morning. My sense is that none of them will play out. In the next 15 years, it could be a combination of all of them or none of the above. Probably a combination of all 4 of them plus something else not shown this morning now. Obviously, limitation of time, you can only show 4. So I'd like some comment from our speaker, right? Now, the third thing is a bit about our mindset. We are very good at talking about the economy. We are very uncomfortable talking about the person, the human being. So I think this is where STEAM will be very helpful to the conversation if we can stretch our mind a little bit beyond STEM. Comments from the panelists, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, from nowhere. Yeah, right.
So if I may.
First question, Prof. Tan. Yeah.
Yeah. I did not say arts is not important. I'm saying that our STEM foundations is not strong enough. Right? That's a difference. Right? We can use STEAM, no problem. Right? But you need to have strong foundations in STEM. Right? And to just give you an example, I was trying, we set up a data science and analytics major. Right? And we see the importance of data science. Our students who have gone to the New York for the NOC, a lot of them were arts and social sciences graduates. They came back to me and they said, Prof, please teach us more mathematics. Because a lot of the startups in New York City are actually data science startups. Right? And data science is a discipline that cuts across all disciplines. Right? But you need the foundation before you can apply data science to economics, to social sciences, to policies, to healthcare, and to whatever you want, right? But you need to actually have a good foundation in mathematics, statistics, and computer science in order to apply data science and analytics, to the other disciplines. So this is what I find problematic, right? So it is actually the competency in computer science, mathematics, and statistics. Another example is information security, right? So there are actually more and more examples of important disciplines that actually needs a very strong background in computer science, mathematics, and statistics.
And Chye, thank you. And Chye, and the second question around scenarios, which is a question I also had in my mind, is it not a combination? How do you use that scenario planning to crystallize, and is it likely to be actually a combination?
Yes, and indeed the exercise of going through a scenario planning exercise is to actually draw a few lines around possible outcomes. And yes, the reality is even if you delve deeper into the 4 different scenarios, it's possible to see traces of a direction in a combination of these scenarios. Nevertheless, it's actually useful to actually take a sharp focus to actually draw the thread through to say, well, if you play that scenario out, how does that end up in terms of a best case scenario or potentially a worst case scenario? So yes, it is possible.
Yeah, and I think when companies look at scenario planning, we know for a fact that none of them are going to be right, none of them. So it's where you're emphasizing and then tracking and having the ability to go between them or adjust the scenario, actually. Yeah. Another question there nearby. Come to you.
Hi, my name is Joshua. I'm from Baring Private Equity, also serving in the Skills and Jobs CFE subgroup. My question is towards Prof. Tan. Sorry, Prof. Tan, this is the second person to grill you now. It's a very serious issue in terms of skills, jobs, and technology. These all are connected. So at this juncture in Singapore, the government is encouraging more technology creation, so-called the R&D, through hefty and generous funding towards HEIs, even private individuals. So that's going to pose a serious challenge in terms of skills, again, jobs. That is the first question the chairman has posed towards the SON. So my view is the country is pushing very hard towards R&D, even the higher education institutions. That will result in creation of wonderful technologies, designs, at the same time loss of a lot of jobs. When we look at the speed of going into R&D and the speed towards scale, the wonderful concept we have launched, though you have explained a little bit, how do we increase the speed of inculcating better knowledge skills and new skills for either existing graduates or graduates like me with the PhD feel very strongly, I have done PhD, what is the necessity for me to get back and acquire the new skills?
Thank you.
Can you please get a little bit more time to explain? Can I have one more point if I can?
If you'd be
very quick one.
Please, we're running, yeah.
Thank you. The second one is the sharing of resources. You explain about NOC and also the so-called attachment program. These are the wonderful schemes, very well-proven schemes. But how do we consider as for whole Singapore? We have 5 HEIs in Singapore plus 1 UNISIM. So we have to make use of the central pool of resources in all the overseas colleges and the schemes to benefit all Singaporeans. The technology-wise, basically, is a problem like medical institutions. The clinical rotation is a big problem. Likewise, in engineering, attachment is a big problem. Whereas in US, we have a huge slots compared to other HEIs. I do have the views actually in CFE. Students unable to get into top-end institutions, so-called the companies, to do attachment. So can we have a resource pool actually available for all students in HEIs? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If we could keep the answers concise, and then we can get a couple more questions in. Thanks.
Thanks, Josh. I think that's a very good question. If we talk about skills, I think one important component is the basic generic skills, right? And in terms of basic generic skills, I've talked about that earlier. A very deep foundation in the basic core skills, all right, plus some of the life skills and the soft skills. So that, with that, then students or graduates would be able to have that agility, that learning agility which Suyan mentioned, to allow them to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Now, if you want to go specific into certain professions, then it can be quite tricky. Even in, say, ICT, I think we have quite a bit of problems in the sense that we know that there are lots of vacancies, 16,000, 17,000 vacancies, but there are also lots of retrenchments in the same industry. And to be able to identify what are the skills gaps, right, that's something can be quite challenging. Then moving on to the new sort of skill sets needed and how research can actually play a key role. I'll give you the example of, say, again, data science. Data science, I think, and analytics is one useful area where the gap between research and application is actually very close, right? And here, I think it's very important for universities to work closely with industry. And we propose actually even a longer internship for our students, in the sense that students will go to the industry, understand the problems, bring the problems back, work with our professors, all right, and solve the problems in the industry. So an extended sort of internship and this closely knitted with the industry would be quite critical in areas like data science and analytics, information security, business analytics, this related fields.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The lady on the left.
Lee Taoyuan, Capel Consulting. I have two questions, and they straddle actually yesterday's sessions as well as today's sessions. My first question is that my understanding is that we are facing a fourth industrial revolution, which means a sea change in terms of technology that requires, I guess, a certain tech savviness. But I'm trying to understand that with this corresponding sea change in technology, is there also a corresponding change in terms of competencies and skills needed for the workforce as well as leadership in terms of the non-tech skills? And what are these? And also, when I hear about collaboration, communication, creativity, I'm in the leadership development field and I say, but we need this now. What is different? What is new? Is it a question of more of these? Or is it something which is a sea change which is needed? And that's the question which I would like to ask the panel. Associated with this is also the fact that yesterday we heard from Professor Loh about high touch. And I'm intrigued by his hairdresser example. You know, and I was wondering if a hairdresser gives me some computer images of what I would look like with different hairstyles, how much would that haircut cost? Would the hairdresser be able? I'm thinking of my hairdresser, and I'm thinking, would she be able to show me those computer images? What sort of training would be required?
Right.
My second question is, so far, we have not talked really about the implications of an aging population, a rapidly aging population in Singapore, with the ability to be tech savvy. I have a presumption, which may be wrong, that somehow if you get into your 50s, 60s, and maybe 70s, it is more difficult to acquire technology than if you were 16. My teenage daughter does this much better than my husband and I, who both have PhDs, do. Thank you.
I think her granddaughter will do it much better than her as well. So things will carry on, won't they? So this will be the last question, and I'm going to go into the break slightly with the answers here, but maybe Dr. van Breda, you can take the first one around that tech savviness, the pace of skills, workforce, but also leadership. How do you do that? Sea change or iteration?
I'll keep it short. I briefed a little bit, I talked a little bit about that. I believe that, and it is also the last question in principle what you asked. I believe that economy-wise, the future will not be different than when we had the first big 4004 Siemens computer, when everybody said, oh, that reduces people to employees till about half. We needed 10 more people. The other thing is, I don't take technology, and I agree with you, because I will be 70 next year, yes. I probably are less inclined, outside that my wife called me the kitchen man, yes. less than a young person of 17 who's grown up with it. But that's not the point. I believe that old age and things and the people of what I said before, PMEs and young people together, yes, will provide the older age generation with the technology, what they can learn from the combination of partnering. Yes, and I can't go too deep in it because our time is up in principle. But when you want to talk about that, I have lots of stories about this, where we have put the older generation with the younger generation, and it works very well, especially when we have people who have a lot of knowledge, have no academic real qualification, but have a real knowledge of working abroad, being abroad, how to work with cultures, and then the knowledge of the younger generation with that makes a great partnership.
Thank you very much. And Suyen, just to close out, a couple of comments. Thanks.
Make a quick comment on your first question with the Industrial Revolution. I actually think that the sea change in competency needed is one around ethics. So when you think about technology and what it makes possible, for example, in the field of biotech, would everyone agree that you should be able to change the DNA of a mosquito so that you no longer can transmit the Zika virus? Most people would say yes, right? But if you can do that, you can also do the reverse, right? So therefore, I think that one of the big sea changes in terms of competency has to do with what do we do with the technology that is available and accessible to us, because that's probably racing ahead of many of the other dimensions that are interrelated.
Right, thank you very much. We'll have the break and the panelists will be there, can ask more questions then, but I think that was a really good session. I enjoyed it, which my preparation, I was thinking, what themes to draw out of this, and I think we've covered some broad ground here and interesting questions and answers as well. So Suyen, Dr. Breda and Prof. Tan, thank you very much for joining the session.